Listeners, this is Bless Radio, and this is a spiritual discussion program. Unfortunately, we started very late today. Apologies for that. The time is 6:44 p.m. UK time. Apologies for that. So I hope you can join us, listeners. I hope you're there. I'm Saad Faruqi, and tonight I'm in London, in southeast London, in Bromley. And the weather here, it's got, let's say, clouds, a little bit of clouds and a bit of blue sky. And it's been chilly today here in London. So I want Gregory, just checking you're there with us. Gregory, welcome, Gregory, to the show.
Hello.
Welcome, Gregory. Just remind us where you are and how is the weather where you are.
Well, I'm still here in Brussels, and it's been cold but bright.
Cold and bright, okay. And also tonight we have Mrs. Igbinoy, also in Brussels. Welcome, Mrs. Igbinoy. How are you? And I guess you're in Brussels as well.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Faruqi. It's nice to hear from you.
Thank
Where
you.
I am, it is bright, but with the possibility of being very cold later in the day.
Okay, so thank you for joining us. So it's three people tonight, and Mrs. Igbinoy and Gregory were there last week, and I was away, so I'm back today, I'm glad to say. And I really want to welcome everybody to the show. Firstly, I want to just tell everybody this is our 250th show. So we have almost been around 5 years. And we've only missed a few shows, I'm glad to say, under exceptional circumstances. So we've been coming every week for almost 5 years now. And I also want to say one more thing. The topic we had last week, respect for women, we had said it was part 1, and so people might be expecting it to be part 2 tonight. We actually decided that we said quite a bit last week, so we're not going to talk about respect for women tonight. So the topic for tonight is living in an ever-changing world. And I just want to say to you listeners, the aim of the show, as always, is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abdrushing. And as I mentioned, the topic for tonight is living in an ever-changing world. And you're very welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us in our which is in our usual UK number, which is 07939 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I'm going to begin with what is the Grail Message? The Grail Message in the Light of Truth by Abdrushing is a spiritual knowledge of life. It offers an explanation of the world, a picture of creation on the basis of natural laws. Its lectures contain valuable basic elements as a help in life, for through the knowledge mediated, the reader is again brought closer to life and led back to God. The Grail Message deals with important fundamental questions of life by explaining in a clear and logical way the automatic working of the laws of nature, the whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover, through the intuitive perception, if what is stated is the truth. Combining with matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises, where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the 5 senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I'd like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail Message, Abdul Shin. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail Message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole without leaving any gaps. Again and again, in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail Message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with 7 seals. And I'd like to give you one more quote from the author. I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace if he earnestly seeks for the truth. So, dear listeners, I just want to remind you the topic we're discussing tonight is living in an ever-changing world, and you're welcome to join us with any question or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 07939 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 7939 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And I just want to say, for the Muslim listeners or those who are going fasting, it's Ramadan Mubarak to you from us. We know it's a sacred month of fasting and blessings, so I want to wish you all Ramadan Mubarak. So just again, listeners, to remind you, the topic tonight is living in an ever-changing world. And tonight we're joined by Gregory, as usual, and Mrs. Ignoy as well, and I'm here back again, Saad Faruqi. So, Gregory, as usual, I would like to check the meaning of the title in the dictionary, and the main, one of the keywords, I'm going to say it this way now, is change or changing. So I'll just use the word change here. So that's in the title we have tonight, is living in an ever-changing world. So I looked up the word change, and I found it says make someone or something different, or alter or modify. And the other meaning they gave in their dictionary, it says replace something with something else, especially something of the same kind, that is newer or better. Substitute one thing for another. So, Gregory, that definition, is that a good definition, or should we add or subtract to that?
I thought these things should be used in context.
Yes.
Because the sentence itself, the expression, talks of an ever-changing world. So it must be in that context. Right. However, one may still go ahead and very clearly state that a change could be a mutation of the object. At the same time, a change may be a movement from one place to the other. The key here is that there is a change of state what it was initially and what it becomes as time progresses. Whether there is a change in form or not, these are different states which are being considered. So the change we will be considering here is a change of state as is right now, or how it was in the past, and how it's likely to be as time goes on. That is the stress that one is dealing with here.
Thank you for that. And you use the word mutate there, and of course, change can be not, which sounds negative in a way. It can sound negative. But of course, change can be positive as well. So, and of course, you mentioned about state, which of course is a neutral word. So, a change of state. So you can read. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be positive. It's just can be neutral even. So let's look at that then. So I just want to focus on that word state, Gregory. When you're talking about state, are you talking in a physical way? Are you talking in a spiritual way? How can we talk more? What you mean by state?
There is the physical state. There is the non-physical state. That non-physical state could be ethereal state, could be animistic state, could be the spiritual state. However, what is being discussed here is there is a change of state. For human beings, a change of state in the spiritual state, that means a movement towards maturity or immaturity. That one may refer to as a change of spiritual state. That means one is improving in one's spiritual maturity. Whereas what is being discussed also here is a change of state of not only the environment, not only the physical environment, but also the constituents of the physical environment, that is the human beings, the environment, the animals, plant and animals, the interaction within the physical universe. These are the ones that one may discuss in this particular scenario.
Thank you for that. So that's quite wide-ranging, and I just want to think about, the title tonight is "Living in an Ever-Changing World." So I would say most of us would think of the word world is almost the earth. But maybe, Greg, I just want to clarify today, are we going to focus on the changing world, ever-changing world on the earth, or are we going to sort of widen it to more than that?
Basically, the impression I have is there is a limitation when the word world is used. That means a consideration about the inhabitants living on Earth, the outcome of their activities, what we see as the manifestation of their physical activities, and how all these things interrelate. That is a narrow aspect, maybe that we may limit it to.
Okay, thank you for that. So, dear listeners, I want to remind you the it's coming up to 7 p.m., so I just wanted to remind the people about the topic again. So, dear listeners, you're listening to the Spiritual Discussion Program. The aim of our show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abrushin. And the topic we're discussing tonight is living in an ever-changing world. And just to remind you, can contact us on our UK number, which is 07939 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Now, Gregory, this pandemic is really been a great way. We've been forced to face things, many different things, and so you could say the world has been changing quite considerably in a short time. And we have had to adapt and to deal with this COVID pandemic. Now, I just want to ask a general question here first. Would you say this pandemic is like a result of Mother Nature forcing us human beings to, tune in to live with other life around us, so that, because we are under lockdown, for example, the environment has been more safeguarded. We have been less traveling, less in production, and so it's like less harm to the environment, and so nature in a way is protecting itself through these ways. And so I want to ask, because that's one of the, I know it's a physical changes that it has forced us to do, for the environment, you can say, also for the protection of our health. So, Gregory, is that, I guess my question is this pandemic a way to force humanity to change, you could say, for the better in terms of living in harmony with nature?
Thanks for this particular question. When such an expression is used, it is used as if nature is on one side and the inhabitants, the earthly inhabitants, albeit human beings, separated from the plants and the animals, are on another side. The impression which arises in many mind is now nature is fighting back. That impression is highly intellectual. That means limited to, or limited by perceptions to the activities which the brain can comprehend. A deeper insight must be an intuitive one. The question one should ask, why has this happened? Does it mean nature, in quotes, which is now taken as something external from us, acts in such an arbitrary way? Or has nature been monitoring the earthly inhabitants and decide to punish them? Many turned to the other side and they follow religion and seek for answers. Of course, there are a lot of conspiracy theories tied to it, yet answers are not found. Nature in itself, in its manifestations, must be included. In fact, nature comes first. For what we see around us, what we perceive with our five senses around us, all this existed before the human spirit in flesh and blood incarnated here on earth. And therefore, one must understand that there is, and there has always been a structure which supports the activities of all the operations you find in nature, and that we, at best, are guests, and we also belong, or our physical instrument, which is the physical body, is also a product that has been fashioned by and through nature. And therefore, whenever one is confronted with things like the pandemic, then we ourselves must carefully examine how that came into being and therefore affecting the whole world. The question is, could we have done better? For it is what we ourselves put into nature that nature will have to nurture and before too long return back to us. So it must be understood that nature is not something which is out there, always fighting with us, wanting to reclaim this. No, it is the human spirit in flesh and blood who, through its activities, have forced these things to become manifest. For when one looks very carefully at the so-called pandemic, had many taken the precaution at that time, it would not have been this widespread. So it would be wrong to accuse nature of doing anything wrong. It is the human beings who have to examine themselves as to how they have responded to an outbreak in a limited place, but without taking precaution, decide to spread it.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Mrs. Benoy, would you like to say something?
No, Mr. Faruqi, I have nothing yet to add. I'm listening.
Okay.
And then I'll ask my question when I'm ready. Thank you.
Ready. Okay, that's fine. So thank you, thank you, Gregory. I know you said a lot there, and you pointed out about the intellect, that how we look at things basically rather than spiritually. And so in a way it just shows like that our attitude and our state, because you mentioned about our state. And obviously when you see, let me say, the picture of the situation in a more wide way, you could say the spiritual way, you get a much better picture of what actually is going on, rather than, like you said, man against nature or Mother Nature reacting to man. We now separate things and cannot see that actually this is all, like you could say, one activity or interactive activity, and rather than something separate. So, and one, let's say man's actions have led to the consequences that have resulted, that we have. Like you say, we could have, when the pandemic started, you could say, or when the COVID started, we could have dealt with it differently if we knew how to act, and then it wouldn't be so widespread as you pointed out. So what it points to me, Gregory, is that we need to be more aware of how nature works. And, the environment is one of the let's say, main focuses of in today's world, but it's always we seem to be behind what is actually happening. So I'm thinking, how is it, Gregory, that we can tune in to nature so that we can work in harmony with nature? Because that's where my question was coming from, that how do we, because it's quite clear we have this wrong idea where it's, let's say, man against nature, or man or nature reacting to man. So how can, Gregory, we realize how man should work with nature? How should it, think of itself as being part of this world rather than separate?
Again and again, it becomes clear that when one looks at the enduring pandemic, it spreads where there is lack of cooperation within the communities. Had there been cooperation within the communities, whether these communities being being different countries, then things can be contained. Again, it shows the advice when one talks about the fire brigade, that it is one for all and all for one. Therefore, when man is engaged in its activities, it must take into consideration what the response of nature will be if it does not get involved in careful activities and understand how it will impact the whole. Today we hear of climate change, albeit because there are some who stress they must continue to live the way they have been living. After all, it wasn't they who brought in the pollution. There are some who do not listen at all. It is this lack of cooperation in tackling a challenge which they, the occupants of this earth, have precipitated. That is the problem. The pristine states of nature, where everything that manifests is in a dynamic balance of giving and taking, must be maintained. Whenever that dynamic balance is upset, then along the line you will find the response, which is a precipitation of all sorts of excesses all over the place. This happens in everyday life, even within the physical body, where there is a dynamic balance between breathing in and breathing out. If, however, you block your nostrils and you refuse to breathe in or out for the next hour or so, then whether one will still be alive or not is a different story. Even if it's for a few minutes, that will upset the balances in other parts of the body. So it is also with nature. There must be a dynamic balance. So it is the duty of man to find what this should be and ensure it is maintained. Not trying to understand what this dynamic balance is, or trying to have an intuitive picture and know how to respond to it, that has been the challenge for man. For only when challenges, difficulties, catastrophes, only when these catastrophes show themselves, only then do we start responding. It's just like you have a person that uses the physical body without caring. Only when pain springs up, that is when he starts caring. So the question is, how should one respond? And very simply, each particular person, each community, each country, and the world as a whole should first strive to listen to their intuition. Only then can they move forward.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. I must say what you said about cooperation and, in fact, of the communities, and the community can be obviously within a nation and then the whole world nations. And I'm thinking it's so idealistic what you're saying, or how can I say, even expecting. And we have differences even within nations, and then the nations, they call it self-interest. They're only interested in their own country, not about another country. Even though this pandemic has shown that they do need to work together, but they still want to do their own thing. And I'm thinking, that's like the only thing I can understand that people do agree in the world is science. So it's like science is the world philosophy, if I can put it like that. That's what they agree on, you could say. And then they cooperate on that basis. So how can they, and we've talked about nature, and sort of nature and science people think are related, but somehow man doesn't bow to really to nature. It's more about following science. They say we are following the science. And but science, I mean, we've said it in our previous shows, that's not really how can I say, able to work in a completely in line with nature, because it's only working in the world of matter, basically, and it is not comprehensive as well. So how can we move, Gregory, from the current situation? Because is it something we'll have to learn over centuries, Gregory, to actually appreciate nature, or to really recognize nature for, it seems that we are not really aligned as a world, in the whole world, to work together. Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Gregory.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
It's quite challenging, the sort of questions you have put forward. Yet the solution to the challenges is quite simple. That only through cooperation can you form a union and improve on the union. Whether it is accepted or not, the different nations, so-called nations of this earth, all depends on the environment which surrounds the earth. It only says, it's common sense, that whenever the environment is diseased in one part through pollution, in all naturalness, that pollution does not remain in that environment alone. The air currents move things around, and therefore it will impact one way or the other on other nations. Therefore, it is common sense that there must be cooperation. For as many found out in the past, when there is some let's say explosion in a different country, these earthquakes, or you found volcanic explosions, it disturbs the environment, and the plumes affect other nations, even the flight path of planes. So it should be very clear that it cannot be otherwise. The more man strives to understand, to study the movement of currents and how things can air or sand dunes, fine sand dunes can get up into the air current and deposit some things from Africa all the way to South America. These are facts which many should investigate. And the so-called science, what it does is it strives to collect the facts, collate them, analyze them, and tries to make sense. The pattern becomes very clear. If that is what science does, then it becomes like the chief executive that collects facts. Which facts have arisen here on earth, have arisen from the activities of nature and also of human activities, and has done some analysis. It can now find the impact and the effects on others. And to a large extent, it has been doing this with the so-called climate change. It is only fair that it makes its publication clear for those who wish to learn. But for many, they are like the ostrich that bury their heads in the sand and refuse to examine the facts. Most likely, it will be too late for some who, refusing to face the facts, dismiss them until they are caught up in something like the pandemic, by which it is too late. Facts come first. However, in the case of science, it only considers the final manifestation of what is able to perceive externally. There are other things which so-called scientific methods are unable to gather because they do not have, or this scientific method hasn't got the capability to examine those things. And these can only be examined through man's intuition. Man's intuition, which is an expression of the spiritual, an expression of the spirit. There, the thoughts of men, the intuitive thoughts of men, which are not perceptible to the human brain, in that particular scenario, in that particular realm, they are able to gather. And before long, we form in their different varieties, densities or dense centers. Thereafter, in accordance with the laws of nature, through which nature or the bodies of men or the inhabitants of nature came into being. These dense areas are then driven to ripen. In that state, they will have to precipitate. In following that pattern, we now have the manifestations of the things which sometimes one will refer to as pandemic. When you have a scenario where there is no war, where there is happiness, everyone is glad that that is happening. Where the crops grow right, it must have been that at that time there are some who along the line have done that which is right. So to have a holistic approach to problems, one should not only consider the intellectual side, which is more or less the scientific side, and the non-intellectual side, which is that which is beyond the expressions or the conceptions of the earthly conceptions of time and space. That's non-earthly, which albeit is the spiritual, is the key. As long as one strives to keep the heart of their thoughts in purity, in accordance with the dynamic nature, the dynamic expressions of give and take in nature, to ensure it is pure, then in response, nature will ensure that what the returns are will be beneficial to man.
Thank you so much for your answer, Gregory. What's clear from what you've said is we really need to change our attitude and our not only attitude but also how we, I use the word operate, but it doesn't sound quite how I want to say it, how we work, you know, how we live actually, because the topic tonight is living in an ever-changing world. The world is changing, ever-changing, and then we are living in this world. And how are we living in this world? You know, how are we reacting or responding to this world? And the living we have been doing, you said we have been using science, intellectual science, but that's, let's say, yes, we need that intellect, but at the same time, there has to be working in harmony with the spiritual activity. And from what you have said, I could see clearly that there has to be the spiritual view that must be, we must be working, seeing things within a spiritual view, which is like working in harmony, working in cooperation with our fellow man and nature. So this is what you have. Oh, can you hear me?
Hello, House. Yes, please. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, please. Yes.
I've listened to you and Mr. Gunoy, and I have a question.
Yes.
The religious people say that this is the time of the judgment, that the world is coming to an end, and then that is why we are experiencing climate change and like other diseases like the SARS, Corona. How do you link the present natural happenings to this religious belief that the world is coming to an end? Is it true that the world is coming to an end? That is why we have all these manifestations. Mr. Faruqi or Mr. Igbanoy, please.
Okay, maybe I will say a short, my understanding of the situation, and then Mr. Gunoy can come in next, if that's okay. So what I will say is, when people say this religious, like a prophecy, and then they have their own picture of what that means, and then there's something that's happening on the ground, and what you'll find is the picture that the religious picture that people have, even let's say it is true that is, well, let's say in the overall sense it's true, but how it manifests is not quite the way they think it might be. So it's like they might expect a total damnation or devastation for the whole earth to be destroyed, and all peoples to die out, or something of that nature. And what we find in most cases that these predictions and let's say beliefs, it never happens that way. That something may happen, and then man continues to exist beyond that. So I would say that religious belief, it's not actually fully correct, and not, or let's say what the people believe it to be is not fully correct. So and then somehow the reality is not fully there. So that's so I will just, and then to answer it a little bit more, I'm going to say things are happening. That you said the judgment is coming. People are saying the judgment is coming. But when, let's say, one event happens, that is not the full judgment. The judgment is a ongoing process, and the exact timing and how long it will last, it's almost, well, we can't really say. I will say it's not like we ever can realize that. And don't forget, this is happening for the whole earth. The judgment is supposed to be for the whole humanity, and things just don't happen in just one, let's say, one cycle. That everything that has happened, that man has done, is now going to sort of complete its full consequences in one day or 100 years or something like that. So it's just ongoing, and I will. So the people just need to have a more comprehensive picture of the actual activity. So I'm just going to stop at that, and I'll ask if Gregory wants to add or say something further about it.
Well, thanks. It's good that this question comes up again and again, because it is the religious people, so-called religious people, who have brought it up, and because of their belief, it is good to examine these things carefully. What many have discussed are the earthly manifestations of some activities which they themselves cannot explain with their physical brain. So they then call upon some further possibility as an explanation. Many have heard of the judgment. The question remains, what is the judgment? The judgment is only a result of that of reaping what one has sown. Reaping what one has sown, not only in the earthly sense, but also in the non-earthly sense. For when we reflect with our heads, with our intellect, these are thoughts. We do not see these thoughts with our physical eyes. When activities are carried out in spirit, many are unable to see these spiritual activities with our physical eyes. However, the laws of creation, under which we have all these manifestations, that whatever one has sown, that is what they will have to reap, coupled with that law of spiritual gravitation, of that which is higher or that which is lighter rises, whereas that which is dense sinks. At the same time, there is the accumulation of similar types, what one may refer to as the attraction of homogeneity, hence similar types. When these are considered from a spiritual standpoint, it means that in the closing of a cycle, for when one has sown spiritually, one has to reap spiritually. And when one has sown in an earthly, one has to reap in an earthly sense. However, the religionists only consider in their interpretation, they perceive and they see the earthly manifestations, but the non-earthly, albeit the ethereal, the animistic, and the spiritual, they are unable to account for it. And therefore, you find when on earth we have the cycle of sowing a seed and reaping it within 3 months or within years, or sowing a plant, and that plant will take sometimes 5, 10, 15, 20 years. These they are able to follow. But the other seeds which are sown spiritually, they are unable to follow because they themselves might have dropped that which is temporal, that's the physical body, and have passed on in the meantime into the non-earthly environment. And therefore, when you have the cycles which have been initiated spiritually closing, and in comparison with the cycles of creation, there is a final closure due to the perfection of the will of the Almighty, or due to the perfection of the laws of creation. That closure is referred to as the final judgment. Many of the religionists refer to that closure, which they sense, although they cannot explain. And therefore, you find that there are cycles within cycles coming to a close. Here on earth, the events have fallen into such cyclic ways that there are many closures. And one of those closures, due to the density of what had precipitated, now manifesting in an earthly format, you have things like COVID, you have things like quakes, you have things like volcanic eruption. That is the reason you find the quickening of events in these closures. What in the past would have taken many years to manifest, within a short period, it now manifests. And once you have the shortening of times of manifestation, then the closure is near. And that is what many are referring to as the final judgment. So that is how one can look at it with the right attitude in a holistic sense rather than in a very narrow and local sense.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Really, with your answer, you've shown the necessity to see the big picture. This is a process, this judgment that people talk about, and it's really not, as you pointed out, it's not just the earthly that is part of this judgment, it's also the spiritual. The whole judgment covers this wide sphere, and people see too narrowly, let's say, from their own point of view or what they know, and think that is it, the whole picture, and it's not like that. So it's much more comprehensive, and so I will just advise everybody to look at the Grail Message, which explains these things in detail. We can only touch upon these things here on our radio show. There, as Gregory has been answering, it is really quite a detailed picture that you have to grasp to understand this. And so I do recommend everyone to pick up the Grail Message, which contains the knowledge explaining this world that we live in and creation. And if you are interested in getting a copy of the Grail Message or want more information on the Grail Message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, that's Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And you're listening to Blessed Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program. The aim is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abdushin. And the topic we're discussing tonight is living in an ever-changing world. Living in an ever-changing world. You're welcome to join us with any question or comments. You can contact us on our UK number, which is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And very briefly, we are broadcasting on Bless Radio 1, the number 1.com. Bless Radio 1, the number 1.com. Also, we are broadcasting on YouTube live, where you can go to youtube.com and type in the search box Bless Radio 1, the number 1, and then space live stream. And you can also listen to the recording of the show the next day on YouTube. Again, go to youtube.com and then type in the search box Bless Radio 1, the number 1, then space Grail Message, and then space the title of this show or the topic, which is today, Living in an Ever-Changing World. Gregory, I was watching this on BBC, this Wreath Lectures, which is basically held annually, and they ask a sort of a eminent speaker to give a talk, and this one was about, well, this was given by Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor, and it's actually a series of lectures he's giving, and this one was titled Moral to Market Sentiments. And I know it sounds intellectual and sounds, let's say, very specific about economics and so on, but there was something he was talking about which is got related to spirituality. So he was talking about values, and of course he started with this, that he gave this example. Basically, he said the monetary value of water is very low. In other words, it's very cheap, but it has a very high utility, and it is plentiful. Whereas diamonds, which has a very high monetary value and has a low utility and is rare, and basically it's based on this high aesthetic value. So the word there is utility. So things that we really use. And so some things we value which we know are important, like water, but we value it quite cheaply. And then something like diamonds, which has no real practical sort of usage, well, that's a limited practical usage, and yet we value it so highly. And then he gave another example. Let me not go there, actually. Let's just focus on this one, Gregory. So I just want to say what I'm pointing to, Gregory, that the world is like sees things in a materialistic way. So these diamonds, we treasure them more than water in a way, and water has so much benefit, multiple benefits, you know, in just not only the drinking, obviously, but in many uses it has, and yet is considered to be not of such high value. So the question I want to ask there is, we've been talking about spiritual views and intellectual views. Do we really need to rethink, Gregory, or rethink of how we actually value things? How should we value things? Because let me just put it another way. If we value it only in monetary terms and consider that to be the most important, then you can see it doesn't seem to be compatible with how we live life. So my question, Gregory, just to make it straightforward now, the way human beings value things in life, do we need to review that and really find the right way to review it, to value things?
Well, questions like this arise again and again, and the solution is simple. Each personality must consider what is of beneficial value to them, else it is of less use, that is useless. Ask yourself these questions. Every day, billions of cigarettes are smoked. That causes cancer, causes all sorts of ailments, pollutes the atmosphere, the environment. Of what value is it? It is of destructive value to physical health. Yet, these things are produced. Consider very carefully what is of so-called defense, where to make just one of those bombs may cost 100 million, and that can malfunction anytime, and nations will stockpile so much they can't even provide water for their citizens to drink. Yet they will stockpile this out of selfish reason. As at now, everything is wrong. So everything has to become new. Not the way it is in the past. For what man has done is to make progress in his own personal self-destruction. also in the physical body, and because it is so very lazy, spiritually indolent, is unprepared to look at the holistic parts of solutions. Is only interested in his own part, such that when things like pandemic happen, instead of it to tackle the challenges immediately, it allows it to spread. Therefore, one must grasp it properly. Everything must become new, which means that man, in his attitude, must be prepared to have the right conceptions of space, of time, of the activities, of that which should be beneficial. As long as they have the wrong conception, then they are still in the past. For the wrong conceptions tied to the wrong attitude, the response will be in accordance with the laws of nature, self-annihilation. It's as if man has been disinherited. And therefore, in order for him to inherit that which is beneficial, that intrinsic effort must be made. Whether they do it in groups, in communities, in nations, is immaterial. So everything must become new. How government allocates whatever resources they have to either water or to industry to produce weapons of destruction, or even in this case, cigarettes. All these are sowing, and in due course, in accordance with the dynamic laws of nature, man will have to reap. And in all clarity, transparency, if man has sown the wind, the whirlwind is not difficult to predict. That is why everything must become new if the human personality has to win through. It is no use discussing these things in such a superficial way. Oh, government should do this, government should do that. It is the wrong impression, the wrong things that many have imbibed within themselves that now has led to this selfishness in attitude, where only that which satisfy their physical well-being are considered. Others are automatically eliminated. But in accordance with these laws, each personality will have to experience what they themselves, through their activities, have put in creation. That is what has to change.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I know we're coming to the end of the show, and I just want to put one more question. Again, in the pandemic, we've seen people protesting, after George Floyd's, you could say, killing, and where they were saying no justice, no peace. And it seems, Gregory, that the human system is not capable of delivering justice. And you have already pointed out, we've been using the intellect without using the spirit, to look at things. And so whenever there's something about justice and peace, you can see there's a sense that is not a material thing, that's a sensing from within us and our hearts. You can say, oh, this is not right, this is injustice. So my question, Gregory, is, and it seems to take a long time for the authorities of the world to sort of change. Technologically we are changing quick, but not so much in terms of our systems of justice and so on. And even our attitudes and practices seem to take ages to change. And I know it's sort of related to the previous question about values, but it seems, what I want to ask you, Gregory, is how can, I'm talking on the earthly basis at the moment, how can man adjust himself to, bring peace on this earth through, which is like fulfillment of satisfaction that, yes, we are doing the right things, or at least we're moving in the right direction. Because one thing I can say, things take a long time to change. So, Gregory, should we just move gently along in the changes, in our attitudes, and just like go with the flow, or should somehow we be driving forward these changes? And how do we do that?
First, one needs to understand what justice is. Before one discusses justice, I intend to discuss the task before the human personality. The human personalities, and there are many on earth, different personalities. It is the task of the human personality to improve its conditions. It has to mature in a spiritual sense. It therefore means whatever it's able to perceive, attract, and is part of its ability or set of abilities. It is the task of the human personality to make use of what it has received, pass it on to others, whether others are those who live in the same house or not, or who live far away, 10,000 or 20,000 miles away, material, to pass that which they themselves, which nature, which creation has passed on through them to others. Once they fulfill that, and knowing that only that which is noble, beneficial, is passed through them, as long as each personality strives to do that, then there is justice. As long as the individual doesn't do that, then there's injustice. How can one who is granted an opportunity to mature on earth and also understand that other people have come here on earth to mature, like him, striving to make a living, how can that human personality now, because they are in so-called a higher position, stop the life of another? Injustice. The laws which they have violated, those laws they will have to account for. So if you examine yourself that there is something you need to give to a community and you do not do it, then one has violated that law. Justice will have to be meted out one way or the other. So if one is so-called is a policeman who is supposed to protect and help the community, but has now taken upon themselves to mete out punishment, well, before long, real justice, spiritual justice, divine justice. The thing one man should never forget, the justice in nature, the justice that has been put there in the law of sowing and reaping is the real justice. The justice you see, which is debated in courts, are only intellectual justice. So man or many should take solace that the mills of creation, they may grind slowly, but they will grind exceedingly very fine in the final analysis.
Thank you so much, Gregory. We've come to the end of our show, listeners, tonight. Apologies for our late start. We'd like to have talked more about this topic tonight, living in an ever-changing world. Hope you found it enlightening. And so I'm going to ask my colleagues to say goodbye to our listeners. Gregory, starting with you, is there anything you'd like to say to the listeners to say goodbye?
I wish them all the strength, and they should try to obtain a copy of this work in the light of truth, such that together in our discussions we can examine very carefully.
Thank you for that. And Mrs. Igbinoy, anything you'd like to tell the listeners or say to the listeners?
I thank you all for joining us today, and I wish you all the strength to face these challenging times. All the best. Bye.
Thank you very much. And this is Saad Faruqi here. So yes, thank you, listeners, for joining us tonight. And as Gregory and Mrs. Igbinoy, and I want to join them to encourage you to pick up the Grail Message. And just to remind you, the website you can go to find the Grail Message is www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. So thank you for being with us tonight. I wish you a great week. God bless. We'll be back next Tuesday as usual with a new topic. All the best, everybody. Take care. Good night.